Something about Keith Urban feels different, and people are starting to notice. He's always been the steady one, calm, grounded, the man who seemed to have it all figured out. But lately, a quiet transformation has been unfolding. Subtle at first, then impossible to ignore. The energy, the choices, the way he carries himself. It all feels different now. And the truth behind that shift is far more unexpected than anyone realized. So what really changed? And why now? January 6, 2026 marked the official close of a long chapter in Keith Urban's life. His divorce, which had captured headlines and fueled speculation for months, was finalized, leaving him free, but also facing the reality of rebuilding. After 19 years of putting family first, Keith suddenly had to carve out space for himself again. Emotionally, professionally, physically. Weeks later, he made a choice that surprised many. Instead of diving straight into stadium tours or high-profile events, he joined the top-shelf country cruise aboard the Celebrity Reflection, performing for roughly 1,100 passengers alongside Lee Brice and Scotty McCreery under open skies in Nassau. A cruise ship gig might seem modest for a superstar, but insiders say it was intentional. Cruise ships aren't the dream gig, one source noted, but they pay the bills and give him something to focus on. For Keith, this wasn't a step backward. It was structure, routine, and reconnection. Fans on board noticed something immediately. The energy was raw, unfiltered, and deeply personal. Here was a performer stripped of expectation, connecting directly with his audience in a way that massive arenas rarely allow. While the cruise kept him grounded, a major shift was happening behind the scenes. After 25 years, Keith parted ways with his longtime manager Gary Borman, who retired in early 2026. Keith then signed with Crush Management, a powerhouse team behind artists like Miley Cyrus, Green Day, and Sia. The move signaled something significant: pop rock energy merging with his country roots. New partners, new creative direction, a space that made him want to take risks for the first time in decades. At the same time, he began renovating his Nashville studio, a clear signal he was preparing to create music that was raw, honest, and free, like this new chapter of his life. Then came the bombshell. At the country radio seminar in March, Keith revealed his next project would be a covers album, a tribute to yacht rock from the 1970s and 80s, featuring one original song and possible collaborations with Little Big Town and John Mayer. Fans thought it was a joke. It wasn't. This wasn't a safe, calculated move. It was an artistic risk from a man no longer afraid to explore new territory. The outward change mirrored the internal one. Keith looked leaner, sharper, and more self-assured. The tattooed torso, once a personal symbol, had become a public statement, a visual declaration that he was ready to face this next chapter head-on. For most of his life, Keith put others first: his family, his career, his fans. Now, for the first time, he was putting himself first. And what makes this reset truly remarkable is the humility behind it. Keith didn't let ego dictate his choices. Performing for 1,100 people on a cruise ship instead of a sold-out stadium wasn't a downgrade. It was perspective. A reminder of why he fell in love with music in the first place. This chapter isn't a fall from grace. It's planned, intentional, and empowering. After battling addiction, navigating heartbreak, and living under relentless public scrutiny, Keith is proving that you don't have to start over at the top to reinvent yourself. Sometimes, you step into smaller spaces to restore your confidence, try new things, and rediscover joy in what you do. The cruise performances, the new management, the studio renovations, the bold creative choices. None of these are accidents. They're signs. Keith Urban is taking control of his own story, reclaiming his voice, and showing the world that a legend can rise again, quietly, deliberately, and on his own terms. To understand the transformation happening now, you have to go back to the beginning. Keith Urban didn't grow up anywhere near the world he would come to dominate. He was raised in Caboolture, a quiet part of Australia where life was simple. Nothing about that environment hinted at global success. But from the age of 8, music wasn't just something Keith enjoyed. It was something he obsessed over. He didn't casually strum chords. He repeated them, corrected them, refined them, spending hours on details most kids would never notice. While others moved on to the next thing, he stayed with the guitar until it felt right. That focus only sharpened through his teenage years. He joined local bands, performed in small settings, and entered competitions, not just to win, but to test himself. Eventually, it became clear that staying comfortable would limit how far he could go. So he made the move to Nashville in his early 20s, stepping into a competitive, unforgiving world with no guaranteed opportunities and no clear path forward. Nashville challenged him immediately. He played small venues to crowds that weren't even paying attention. Rejection was constant. Doors didn't open easily. But instead of slowing down, he adjusted. He practiced harder, listened more carefully, and studied artists like Johnny Cash, paying attention not just to the sound, but to the emotion behind it. His perfectionism became his edge. If something didn't feel real, he reworked it. If a performance didn't land, he analyzed it and came back stronger. By the late 90s and early 2000s, his sound started reaching people, not just because of his skill but because of its honesty. There was something in the way he delivered his songs that felt real, unforced, and deeply relatable. That authenticity made him stand out. Those years shaped everything. His discipline, his resilience, and his refusal to stop improving, even without immediate reward. By 2005, Keith Urban was rising fast. The music was working. The crowds were growing. His name carried real weight. But offstage, the reality was heavier. Years of touring, late nights, and relentless pressure had taken a toll. What began as part of the lifestyle quietly became something harder to manage, alcohol and substances becoming his way of coping. From the outside, there were no obvious signs. Internally, things were becoming increasingly difficult to hold together. And right in the middle of that, Nicole Kidman entered his life. They met in 2005, and the connection was immediate. Two people with demanding careers and complicated pasts finding something that felt stable. For Keith, Nicole wasn't just someone he was with. She was someone who saw past the image and into the parts of himself he hadn't fully confronted yet. In 2006, they married in a private ceremony in Sydney. Shortly after, Keith made a decision that surprised the world. He checked himself into rehab. At the peak of his career, he stepped back and admitted he needed help. Nicole didn't retreat when things got difficult. She stayed. Keith later called her the lifeline he wasn't sure he deserved, crediting her not with fixing everything, but with standing beside him while he worked through it himself. Recovery wasn't instant. It required discipline, setbacks, and continuous effort. But over time, things began to stabilize. They welcomed two daughters, Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret, and built a life that appeared, from the outside, to be everything anyone could hope for. But even within that stability, the cracks were forming. Long stretches apart, careers pulling them in different directions, constant public scrutiny. In 2013, another incident connected to substance use surfaced, a reminder that recovery is never a straight line. He acknowledged it, reaffirmed his commitment, and kept moving forward. That's what defined this period. Not perfection, but persistence. He dedicated songs to her. Tattoos bore her name. He made it clear to anyone listening how much she meant to him. From the outside, it looked like a story of redemption. Someone who struggled, found support, and rebuilt everything with the right person beside him. Which is exactly why what came next felt so unexpected. For nearly 2 decades, Keith Urban and Nicole Kidman gave the world what looked like a perfect story. Multi-platinum albums, Grammy wins, sold-out tours, Oscar-winning performances, 2 daughters raised with shared Australian roots and a love that seemed unshakable. But appearances can be deceiving. Keith's High and Alive World Tour in 2025 kept him on the road for months at a stretch. Nicole's filming schedule pulled her across continents. Friends and insiders would later say their priorities had quietly begun to drift. Keith immersed in music and live performance, Nicole longing for deeper connection at home. The small cracks, the long absences, the emotional distance, the unrelenting spotlight, they accumulated silently, invisible from afar but palpable to those closest to them. Then came September 2025. Nicole filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. The public reaction was immediate. Fans who had watched them overcome addiction, build a family, and thrive together were stunned. The divorce was finalized January 6, 2026. Nicole retained primary custody of Sunday and Faith. Both parents committed to co-parenting with care, prioritizing their children above the public spectacle. Reports indicated Keith had pushed for the split, while Nicole had hoped to save the marriage. Looking back, the signs were there: lyric tweaks, band shakeups, subtle shifts in stage energy. Fans suddenly saw new meaning in songs about love, loss, and moving forward. Those weren't just songs anymore. They were glimpses into a life lived under extraordinary pressure. These so-called stable years weren't failures. They were lessons in endurance, emotional complexity, and the quiet cost of keeping everything together when the world is always watching. 2025 became the year everything changed. Fans following the High and Alive tour noticed something different almost immediately: extra emotion in familiar songs, unexpected shout-outs, small but pointed lyric changes. On stage, Keith still smiled and played the songs everyone loved. But the rawness was undeniable. When asked about the speculation, he simply said, "Stop reading into it." But people were paying attention. One of the first visible changes came within his band. After more than 25 years, Keith parted ways with key longtime members, including bassist Jerry Flowers and his lead guitarist. Publicly, he framed it as following his inner voice and embracing creative renewal. Behind the scenes, the timing aligned closely with the private unraveling of his marriage. On stage, the lyrics began to carry sharper edges. In The Fighter, an unusual shout-out to guitarist Maggie Ball felt pointed and deliberate. In You'll Think of Me, added lines that fans quickly read as candid nods to marital tension. For the first time, his songs weren't just telling stories, they were hinting at his own. The man who once sang about devotion and romance was quietly narrating heartbreak in real time. Physically, the changes were equally deliberate. Keith appeared leaner, sharper, and more composed at awards shows and public events. A new attention to style and grooming. Tattoos that still bore Nicole's name, now raising quiet questions about memory, tribute, and identity. The contrast was striking. The man who had celebrated love so publicly was now projecting independence and resilience, signaling that he was ready to face life on his own terms. Every choice during this period, the band shakeups, the lyric revisions, the physical transformation, was a response to a profoundly complex moment. Personal evolution and professional reinvention colliding all at once. Keith Urban's story in 2026 isn't a conclusion. It's a beginning. He is a man who has faced addiction, heartbreak, and the quiet erosion of a 19-year marriage, all while living in full public view. And rather than retreating, he's rebuilding. Deliberately, humbly, on his own terms. New music is coming. Rumors suggest deeply personal songs rooted in this period of growth. Country roots blending with sounds his most devoted fans wouldn't expect. His approach to touring is shifting, too, balancing massive stages with intimate performances that prioritize genuine connection over spectacle. Off-stage, he remains fully committed to co-parenting Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret. Proof that while one chapter has closed, family still matters deeply. And fans are watching, not just out of curiosity, but out of admiration. Because Keith Urban's journey is a reminder that it's never too late to rewrite your story, that real strength doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it shows up quietly, on a cruise ship stage, in a renovated studio, in a bold creative risk that everyone said didn't make sense. Keith Urban isn't just coming back. He's evolving, and the most compelling chapters may still be ahead.